You are descended from people who would have found the idea of a king absurd, even offensive for most of human history. Anyone who tried to lord it over the group got mocked, shunned, or worse. Equality wasn't a modern ideal invented by philosophers. It was the ancient default, the way humans lived for hundreds of thousands of years. So explain what happened. Explain how a species that spent almost its entire existence refusing to be ruled ended up not just obeying kings, but worshipping them as living gods. That is one of the strangest turns in the whole human story, and it happened astonishingly fast. I want to be clear about what kind of video this is, because we're wading into power and authority and the sacred, and those are heavy waters. This is not me telling you what to think about any of that. This is a history video and anthropology video. We're asking a genuine question. Where did kings come from? Not just how did one person get power, but the deeper, weirder question. How did we ever start believing they deserved it? How did rulers become holy? Because here is the thing nobody tells you about kings. They are not natural. They are not ancient. They are not woven into human nature the way we're often led to assume. For the overwhelming majority of our time on this planet, humans had no kings, no chiefs, no bosses, no rulers of any kind. And they didn't just happen to lack them, they actively, deliberately prevented them. Which means the real mystery isn't why some people wanted power. Someone always wants power. The mystery is why the rest of us, after ages of refusing to give it, suddenly started handing it over and then dropped to our knees. By the end of this video, I think you'll see the crown very differently. So let's start with the world before kings, because it is not what most people picture. When we imagine early humans, we often import our own assumptions about power. A brutish alpha male club in hand, dominating everyone. But the actual evidence from the study of hunter-gatherer societies, the closest window we have onto how our ancestors lived for most of our history, points to something almost the opposite. These societies were over and over fiercely, determinedly equal. Not by accident, on purpose. The anthropologist Christopher Boehm studied this closely, and he described it with a phrase, "I love reverse dominance hierarchy." Here is what it means. In most primate groups, the strong dominate the weak, but in human forager bands, something flipped. The ordinary members of the group actively banded together to stop any single individual from dominating them. The whole community became a kind of coalition against would-be bullies and bosses. Equality was not the absence of politics. It was a constant active political achievement, defended every single day. And how did they defend it? With a toolkit of what anthropologists call leveling mechanisms, and they are wonderfully human. The first and most powerful was mockery. If someone started acting arrogant, boastful, above their station, they got teased relentlessly. Their ego was punctured with humor before it could swell into authority. In some societies, a successful hunter who bragged about his kill would be met not with praise but with cutting jokes about how skinny and pathetic the animal was, deliberately, to keep him humble. There is a famous description of exactly this, of hunters insulting their own generous gifts of meat precisely so no one could use generosity to buy status. Beyond mockery, there was criticism, disobedience, and if someone truly would not stop trying to dominate, the ultimate tools, shunning abandonment. And in extreme cases, the group could remove a persistent tyrant permanently. Think about what this means. For most of human history, the response to someone trying to become a king was to cut them down. Ambition for power over others wasn't admired. It was a threat to be managed. Our ancestors were, in a real sense, natural egalitarians, not because they were gentle saints, but because they were vigilant and they refused to be ruled. That is the world you actually come from, a world that would have laughed a would-be king right out of the band. And I want you to really understand why this equality was even possible, because it wasn't just a matter of attitude. It was baked into how forager life worked. Remember, in a mobile hunting and gathering world, there was almost nothing to hoard. You couldn't accumulate a fortune when everything you owned had to be carried on your back. Food, especially, couldn't easily be stored, so the smartest thing to do with a big kill was to share it widely, because generosity today meant someone would share with you tomorrow when your own hunt failed. Sharing wasn't sentimentality, it was survival insurance in a world without refrigerators or banks. And a world where wealth cannot pile up is a world where no one can buy power. There was simply no lever a would-be ruler could pull. No granary to control, no treasure to command, no way to make others depend on you. Everyone had roughly the same access to the same resources, and everyone could, at any time, simply pick up and walk to another band if someone became insufferable. That freedom to leave was itself a powerful leveler. You cannot tyrannize people who can just get up and go. The whole structure of that life pushed relentlessly toward equality, and our ancestors reinforced it with everything they had. So what on earth changed? How do you get from that to the pyramids? The answer, the thing that cracked the ancient equality open, can be summed up in one word: surplus. And to get surplus, you need one enormous change: farming. For hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors were mostly mobile foragers, and a mobile forager cannot accumulate much of anything. You can only own what you can carry. There are no vast stores of wealth because there is no way to keep them and no way to haul them. But when humans began to settle down, to farm, to domesticate plants and animals roughly 10 to 12,000 years ago, everything shifted. Suddenly, for the first time, humans could produce more food than they immediately needed. They could store it, grain in a granary, animals in a herd, wealth that could pile up, be counted, be owned, and crucially, and that changes the entire game of human power permanently. In a foraging world, you cannot get rich, and you cannot easily force people to obey, because they can simply walk away and feed themselves anywhere. But in a farming world with stored surplus, suddenly some people can control the granary. They can control the irrigation, the harvest, the food that everyone now depends on. And the moment a small number of people control the thing everyone needs to survive, the ancient equality is finished. You cannot easily walk away anymore. Your life is tied to the land, the stores, the system, and whoever controls the surplus controls you. And notice how the old escape hatch slams shut in the foraging world. The ultimate defense against a bully was simple. You left, you walked to the next valley and kept living, but a farmer can't walk away. His entire livelihood, his fields, his stored grain, his animals, the years of labor he has poured into a patch of land, all of it is rooted to one spot. He is, for the first time in human history, trapped by his own wealth. He has too much to abandon and nowhere to carry it. And a population that cannot leave is a population that can be ruled. The very thing that made farming so powerful, that it let humans build up and stay put and grow, is the same thing that handed would-be rulers their opportunity. Surplus didn't just create something worth stealing. It created people who could no longer run ad-growing populations, where you no longer even know everyone in your community. So the old face-to-face mockery and social pressure stop working, and the ancient leveling machinery breaks down completely. The tools that kept our ancestors equal simply don't function in a city of strangers. So now you have inequality, you have people with power over others, but that still isn't a god king. A person controlling a granary is powerful, but they're not holy. And this is where we reach the deepest and strangest part of the whole question, because obeying someone with power is one thing, worshiping them is something else entirely. So let me throw something at you that might sound wild, but I think it is the real key. But first, notice that even the jump to raw power didn't happen in one leap. It climbed a ladder, rung by rung, and each rung felt small to the people standing on it. Anthropologists who study how societies grew more complex often describe a rough progression. First comes the big man, someone who gains influence not by force but by generosity and skill, throwing great feasts, giving lavish gifts, building a web of people who owe him. He has influence but no real authority, and it dies with him. Then, as populations grow and surplus deepens, you get the chief whose position starts to become permanent, even inherited, passed to his children. Influence has hardened into an office. And finally, at the top of the ladder, the king, whose authority is total, hereditary, and increasingly wrapped in the sacred. Each step looks modest from the step below. A generous man becomes an important man. An important man's son inherits his importance. An inherited position gathers more and more power. Nobody living through any single step necessarily saw a monster being born. But stand back and look at the whole staircase, and you can watch equality transform into monarchy, one reasonable seeming step at a time. That is often how the biggest changes in human history happen. Not in one dramatic moment, but in a long series of small steps that each felt almost normal. Raw power is expensive and unstable. If you rule purely by force, you have a problem. People resent force. They resist it. They plot against it. And you have to spend enormous energy holding them down. Force alone is exhausting and fragile. But what if the people didn't just fear you? What if they believed deep in their bones that your power was right, that it was sacred, that it came from the gods themselves, or that you were a god? Then you wouldn't need nearly as much force. People would obey you, not because they had to, but because they believed they should. They'd police themselves. They'd feel that resisting you wasn't just dangerous, it was wrong, an offense against the cosmos itself. That is the genius and the terror of divine kingship. By wrapping political power in sacred meaning, rulers transformed obedience from something extracted by force into something given by faith. Across the ancient world, again and again, we see this fusion. The king becomes connected to the divine. In some places, the ruler is a god. In others, the chosen representative of the gods, the one person who can speak to them, who keeps the cosmic order, who makes the sun rise and the river flood and the harvest come. The pharaoh, the god king, the emperor with the mandate of heaven. Suddenly the ruler isn't just a strong person hoarding grain. He is the linchpin of reality itself, and to defy him is to invite chaos, famine, and the anger of the gods. And here is why this worked so terrifyingly well. It plugged straight into instincts we already had, because remember, we are primates, and underneath our egalitarian streak runs an older, deeper current. The capacity for hierarchy, for deference, for looking up to something larger and more powerful than ourselves. Our ancestors spent ages suppressing that current with their leveling mechanisms, but they never erased it. It was always there. And divine kingship found a way to switch it back on and aim it at a single person. It married our genuine human capacity for awe, for reverence, for devotion to something greater, and it pointed all of it at a human being wearing a crown. The same feeling that might be directed at the vast sky or the mystery of death or the spirits of the ancestors was captured and focused onto a ruler. That is an extraordinarily powerful thing to do to the human mind. And there is another instinct it exploited, just as ancient and just as deep, the human hunger for order, for a story that makes sense of a terrifying world. Life in the ancient world was frightening and unpredictable. Floods came or didn't. Harvests failed, plagues swept through, enemies attacked, and into all that chaos, divine kingship offered something profoundly comforting. A story in which someone was in charge, someone held the cosmic order together, someone stood between the people and the abyss, keeping the sun on its path and the seasons turning. To a frightened human being, a god king wasn't only a source of fear. He could feel like a source of safety, a guarantee that the universe made sense and someone competent was steering it. That is a deeply seductive promise. It is much easier to hand your obedience to someone if you believe that in doing so, you're buying order, protection, and meaning in a world that would otherwise be pure chaos. Kingship didn't just threaten people into submission. It offered them a comforting story, and many were glad to believe it. And you still carry the machinery that made it possible. You feel it, that flutter of awe in the presence of someone powerful or famous, the strange instinct to defer to a confident voice, to fall in line behind authority, to feel that some people simply belong above others. We like to think we're all natural rebels, but the truth is more uncomfortable. We are both. We carry the ancient egalitarian who resents the boss and the ancient primate who wants to bow to the chief, warring inside the very same skull. Kingship won for thousands of years by feeding the second one. Now we have to talk about the cost of all this because it was enormous, and it is the uncomfortable heart of the story. Here is the hard part. The fusion of power and the sacred didn't just create order. It created the ability to extract on a scale never before possible in human history. Once a ruler was holy, once obedience was a sacred duty, people could be made to give up staggering amounts. Their labor, year after year, a huge share of the food they grew, their sons for armies, sometimes their very lives, in some cultures buried alongside a dead ruler to serve him in the next world. Those enormous ancient monuments, the tombs and temples and pyramids, are in one sense wonders of human achievement, and in another sense they are monuments to extraction, built by countless ordinary people whose names we'll never know in service of a single person they'd been taught was divine. The same sacred story that gave a society order and meaning and unity also gave it a machine for turning the many into instruments of the few. And I want to be fair here because it is not a simple story of villains. These systems often did provide real things. Order in place of chaos, coordination of vast projects, irrigation, defense, trade that genuinely helped people survive and even flourish. Shared meaning and identity that bound huge numbers of strangers together for the first time. Divine kingship was, among other things, one of the first technologies for getting millions of unrelated people to cooperate, and that was genuinely new and genuinely powerful. The tragedy and the truth is that the same invention did both at once. It built the granary that fed the city and the throne that owned the granary. Order and oppression flowing from the very same source. That is not a comfortable conclusion, but it is an honest one. So why did humans start worshiping kings? And here is the honest answer. The one this channel always owes you. There was no single first king, no one moment we can point to. It is crucial to understand that this didn't happen once. It happened many times independently in different places across the world, wherever the conditions lined up. Farming surplus, settlement, growing populations, and someone clever enough to fuse power with the sacred. It emerged gradually over generations, through countless small steps, a big man becoming a chief becoming a king becoming a god. each step feeling almost natural to the people living through it. Until one day, people were kneeling before a divine ruler and could no longer imagine the world any other way. We can't date the first worshipped king, but we can see with real clarity the recipe that produced them over and over all around the globe. But here is the part I find most important and most hopeful in a strange way. Kingship is not human nature. That is the thing to hold on to. For the vast majority of our existence, we lived without it and actively resisted it. The God King is not written into our species. It is a relatively recent arrangement born from specific conditions that dominated a few thousand years of our history and has been challenged again and again ever since. The ancient egalitarian in you, the one who bristles at being bossed around, who wants to puncture the arrogance of the powerful with a well-aimed joke, that person is not a modern rebel. That person is the oldest, most traditional human of all. That impulse is your true inheritance, far older than any crown, because that is what I want to leave you with. When you feel that flash of resentment at someone who thinks they're above you, that instinct to question authority, to refuse to simply bow, understand what it actually is. It is not a flaw, or immaturity, or a modern attitude problem. It is a 100,000-year-old inheritance from ancestors who would not be ruled, who mocked the would-be tyrant, who shared the meat equally, who insisted every single day that no one person is worth more than another. Kings are the newcomers in the human story. The stubborn, prickly refusal to worship them is the ancient part. And it is still in you, quietly reminding you that you come from people who looked at the very idea of a god king and would have laughed. They didn't start out worshiping kings. It took a farm, a granary, and a sacred story to make them kneel. And some part of us, the oldest part, never fully stopped standing back up. So here is my question for you. Do you think that ancient egalitarian instinct is still winning or losing in the world you see around you today? I'm genuinely curious how you see it. Let me know in the comments. Until then, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you soon.